Oh, hello. Welcome to another episode of Speaking with Confidence with Kat Matson. Before I get stuck into the juice of today's episode, I want to let you know I'm hosting another one of my Speak Easy elevator pitch sessions. Now, if you're new to my world, you might not know what one of these is. Let me explain it like this. You know how you'd love to think that you've got your elevator pitch all sorted, but then you meet somebody at a networking event and all of a sudden you just can't get the words out and you end up carrying on like a pork chop, not really explaining what you do, and you kind of kick yourself afterwards and go, whoa, what was that? Well, in my Speak Easy practice sessions, you get to practice your elevator pitch. And because elevator pitches are one of my little specialties, I'll give you some coaching as well. So they're free, it's online, it's completely safe. Even if you just want to show up and listen to other people's elevator pitches, that is all fine. Because honestly, when you can articulate your elevator pitch in a way that makes you smile and that connects with the person listening, so many things fall into place. But we don't get the opportunity to practice, do we? So my Speak Easy elevator pitch practice session is happening on Friday, the 29th of August. It's happening lunchtime Brisbane time, so that's 12:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time, and it is free, completely free. The link is in the show notes. No, recordings are not sent out for this one unless you attend, just to maintain the safety and the sanctity of the space. But if you can make it, oh my goodness, it's the best 60 minutes you will spend on yourself this month. So the Speak Easy elevator pitch practice session coming up on Friday, the 29th of August. Wow. Welcome back. It's episode 160. 160 of the Speaking with Confidence with Kat Matson podcast. Thank you for listening and thank you for tuning in. It's fabulous to have you here. If you're a new listener, then what you don't know yet is that this is the show where I coach business owners, public servants, other humble leaders and corporate hippies how to speak with confidence, authority, authenticity, and with impact. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. It is lovely to have you here. How are you? I hope you're doing fabulously. Today, I am answering another question from the community, and I've got to say, when I got this question, I might have clapped my hands with a little bit of glee because the question was, how do you be a good MC? What is the role of an MC? The do's and don'ts of MCing. And the reason I got so excited about this is of all of the speaking formats, keynotes, panels, podcasts, reels, MCing has got to be my favorite. In fact, MCing and moderating panels, my all-time favorite. So the questioner goes on to say, how do you deliver an authentic acknowledgement of country that might have some relevance to the event? How much, when you're MCing, is about you and your brand, and how much of it is it about the event and that organisation? How do you deal with too long bios of speakers? I could go on, she said. Sounds like she's done this a couple of times. So maybe you've been asked to MC something at your local Chamber of Commerce or networking event. Maybe at work you've needed to actually MC something and you're like, how do I do this? Maybe you've been asked and you've just said, not a chance, because you didn't know this. So listen in, because that's what this episode is all about. Now, the purpose of an MC, let's get really clear first up. The purpose of an MC is to keep everything running smoothly. It's to connect the dots between the speakers, between the themes, between the objectives of the event. And I think this is one of the things that MCs miss. Your role is to edify and elevate the speakers. Your job is to help them if they're struggling, or help the audience make sense of the connections between the different speakers. The other thing, and this is probably the most important element of being an MC, it's to make the event easy and enjoyable for your audience. Easy and enjoyable. Because you've been to those events where the MC hasn't done that, right? And it's a cluster. It's chaotic. You're not quite sure what's going on. It all just feels really, I don't know, scrambly, rambly, just, like it doesn't feel easy. And you leave kind of, I don't know, feeling a little bit discombobulated. A good MC, an MC who just understands their role, will hold it all together. So even if there's stuff ups, even if not all the speakers are awesome, even if things go wrong, the audience will still leave feeling good. The audience will still leave knowing that they were safe, they know what to do, and they still leave going, that was a good event, even if it didn't all go to plan. So, look, I have an entire module on how to MC events in my Impactful Presenters program. There's a lot to it, but in the context of, handling those one-off kind of events, or I'm just thinking even if you're asked to MC a wedding, here are some things to consider. First of all, make sure you are aligned with your event planner, manager, organizer, like whoever's brought you in. What's the purpose of the event? Who's attending? Who's in the audience? Who are the speakers? Have you checked the pronunciation of all of the names of the speakers? Or if it's a tongue twister of a name, check in with the speaker beforehand and let them give you their name and listen to it. I've learned one of the things about myself is if I've got a difficult name to say, and if I'm trying to read it, particularly when I'm nervous or in the moment, the phonetic, like trying to read it phonetically, won't work. So I need to hear it from the person themselves and literally say it out loud a few times myself before hitting the stage. There's also been times when it's come to a tricky name and I've just gone, I'm sorry, I can't get that last name. Would you please welcome? And they laugh and everyone's fine. So that was just a bit of a side rabbit hole about names. But work with your event planner first and understand what are the moving parts. Also with your event planner or your manager, just check in. Who's keeping time? Who's stage managing the event? A lot of the times, particularly in a more casual event, you as the MC are responsible for managing time, for winding up the speakers, for making up time if you need to, for expanding time if you need to. So just be really clear on how all that's working. Now, my questioner asked a very important question. How do you deliver an authentic acknowledgement of country that might have some relevance to the event? Now, first of all, an acknowledgement of country for those of us in Australia is an acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land on where we're gathering. For those in overseas locations, you might have something similar. As a non-Indigenous person doing an acknowledgement of country, I am simply saying thank you. Thank you for your hospitality. Just like if you were to walk into anyone's house, you would say, thanks for having me. If you were to, in fact, a lot of times we will start an event by saying thank you to the organisers for hosting us. When we're doing an acknowledgement of country, we're doing that at a more at a bigger, larger scale, and we're saying thank you, Indigenous owners, for hosting us. Now, I have been in many political circles, well, in many formal circles, where the acknowledgement of country is really scripted and it ends up sounding quite tokenistic. So I really appreciate the questioners. In fact, it was Loretta, with asking with that distinction, how do you make it, or how do you have some connection to the event? For me, and I learnt this from an Indigenous member of Parliament, actually, that I worked with a lot in my previous role. And I listened to her do her acknowledgements of country. And so I actually followed up and asked, I said, can you tell me more about that? And she would always not name the tribe and the language group of the land on which she was meeting. She would also then talk about the 60,000 years, of Indigenous people who had inhabited the space before us. And then she would connect it beforehand. So for me, like in those days, those events were often innovation-related events. And so she would say something like, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Yagara and the Turrbal people, and in doing so, may I also acknowledge the more than 60,000 years of invention and innovation that have gone before us. It's literally just drawing the tie in an authentic, real way. I highly recommend that if you want to do more work in this space, that you do some cultural awareness training, or you reach out to some people who do diversity training. And in fact, I will pop a link in the show notes to someone who does just that. So that's your acknowledgement of country. Make it real and make it meaningful for you. If you are unsure of the tribes or the language groups of the land on which you're standing, then just acknowledge the traditional owners. Yeah, and just do it in a way that feels good for you. So that's the acknowledgement of country. Loretta's follow-up question is, how much is about you as the MC? Here's the bad news. Not much. When you're an MC, it is about the event, it is about the speakers, and it is not about you. Now, one of the reasons why we will often accept an invitation to MC, particularly for free, is because we want the exposure, right? So here's the thing. Not all exposure is the kind of exposure that you want. So first of all, I'd really invite you to consider, is this something that is worth you doing? Having said that, if you are invited to MC at an event that is aligned with you, if it's an opportunity to stand in front of a room of your ideal clients or people who you want to get to know you better, it's an amazing opportunity to build profile, an amazing opportunity to build profile. And so even though as the MC you don't get the opportunity to make an offer, to pitch your services, you can seed your expertise as you're connecting the themes. So for example, again, in an innovation event, if someone's talking about if someone's talking about how they've pursued startup funding, I will then, as they've wrapped up, I'll say that's very similar to what I teach when I'm running my startup accelerator program, and then move on. Like it's just a connecting phrase. So I call that seeding content. It's not talking about myself. It's not having a little monologue in between, but it's just letting people know. It's planting seeds. It's letting people know of your expertise, what you do. In fact, have I already done it today? I haven't in this episode, but I will often say, well, actually, no, I have. I said I have an entire module. I have an entire module on MCing in my Impactful Presenters course. That's an example of seeding what else you do. So no, when you're MCing, not much of the event is about you. It's all about the other speakers. Though it is an amazing opportunity to build brand reputation. Which brings me to the next piece. Make sure you introduce yourself. Make sure you introduce yourself, even if someone else already has. But you stand up and say, hi, my name is Kat Matson and I'm your MC today. I'm excited to do so because, and you can link in the relevance there. Connect why you've said yes, why you're MCing this event to your bigger picture why, how it's relevant to you. Again, that's an opportunity to seed your expertise, your experience, and depending on the time constraints, you might even do a little bit of an earn the right to build rapport with the audience as well as establish some credibility. I will pop a link in the show notes to another episode that talks a little bit more about that. How to MC an event. Well, that's episode 90, but also how to host a panel discussion that your audience loves. And that's episode 67. And again, it's quite similar. When you're moderating a panel, you are showcasing your panelists, but when you're hosting, you're also establishing your own credibility. So there's some bit more insight there in terms of how you can do that. Loretta asks, what do you do with speaker bios that are too long when you're emceeing? You want to have a look at those bios beforehand. You want those bios at least the day before, if you're me. In fact, I can do it on the fly. But you want to have a look. And if you have just received, 5 speaker bios and they're all a page long, make your own notes and choose what you're going to say in your style, in your vein of what is relevant to the audience, and how you're connecting all of the dots. One of the things that I also like to do is I'll go and find a little bit of a random tidbit. So I'll go do some social media stalking. And, if I've seen that one of the speakers just did a mountain climb or a marathon or something like that, I'll mention that. Because to be perfectly honest, people are far more interested in those personal anecdotes than they are in the credibility building pieces, because their talk is about to give all of that credibility. So you just make it a little bit interesting. I think sometimes we feel obligated to read a full speaker bio. No, it's just when speakers, and often you're dealing with speakers who aren't professional speakers, but they will give you the entire bio because that's what they think you need. And they're assuming that you're going to summarize it for them that is relevant. So don't get too caught up in, not delivering the entire thing. One other thing that Loretta didn't ask about, but I feel it's really important to mention when it comes to housekeeping. As the MC, it's your job to do the housekeeping. Now, when you get on a plane, as you're taxiing to the runway, the hosties will give you the rundown on how everything works. We're going to serve you some tea and coffee. These are the emergency exits. This is where the bathrooms are, all of that stuff. That's what your job is as an MC for an event. Now, why is this? Because when people don't know what's about to happen, their lizard mind is off trying to figure that out. How long is this thing going to go for? When are we going to get to eat? Is there wine? Are they bringing around coffee? Where are the bathrooms? Oh gosh, how many speakers are there? Are there really that many speakers? Oh my goodness. So you've got to calm all of that down. So you need to make sure that you are including your housekeeping at the beginning. Where are the bathrooms? When are we taking a break? All that kind of stuff, as well as reinforcing it, particularly if you're doing an all-day event as you go throughout the day. And then finally, your job as MC is to manage audience questions. Now, this, in my opinion, is critical. If you let the speakers manage the questions, it goes to SHIT, because they're not used to it and they're coming down from the adrenaline of being on stage. So you need to do it as the MC. So if you're going to audience questions, you take the audience question. Unless the audience has a microphone, you repeat the question. Or better still, you paraphrase it, because most audience questions are also rambling all over the shop, adrenaline fueled. So you want to really rephrase it so your speaker, 1, has time to process what they've just heard from the audience, but 2, everybody else understands what we're about to be talking about. So I see MCs not manage questions very well, and all of a sudden it's just a bit of a cluster, really. So, gosh, I told you this was one of my favourite topics, didn't I? They are my off the top of my head tips for MCing. If I've left anything out, please let me know. Like if you've now got other questions about MCing, let me know. And as I've said, I will pop the links to those other 2 episodes, how to host a panel discussion that your audience loves, as well as how to MC an event well, in the show notes. Whew. Now, if you are MCing events like that, then I'm going to assume that you're also attending networking events where you really want your elevator pitch to be chef's kiss. So a reminder that I'm hosting my Speak Easy elevator pitch practice session on Friday, the 29th of August. It's entirely free. just register via the link in the show notes. And lastly, but certainly not least, if you have a question that you would like me to answer on this podcast, please ask me the question. Best way to do that is over at Instagram at Kat Matson. Cats with a C, ask away. Whew. I hope that was useful. I hope that was enjoyable. And until I see you next week for another episode, here's to confidence and here's to impact. I'll see you soon.